got into the world of highways via the road section of Wandsworth Borough Council. I was doing a sandwich degree in civil engineering, and I just wrote to the technical services director telling him I lived in the borough and could he give me a job for a year, and he did. So I went into the road section and, like Matthew, very different place from now, full of drawing boards and railway curves and rotring pens. And I was introduced to Road Note 29 and the difference between flexible and rigid pavements and cumulative standard axles. I'd also had a Saturday job since the age of 14 in a bookshop. It's very much a customer-facing job. In fact, without the customers, there would be no shop. So I learned the importance of kind of respecting the customer and helping them to find the book they needed, dusting and arranging the books in alphabetical order, all that sort of thing. At this time in my experience in local government, there was very little, if any, mention of customers, which I suppose I could understand. If you worked in the sewers department, you don't really want to be thinking about your customers and what they're up to. Anyway, road safety was a key focus, but it was more about being seen to be doing something in terms of a technical solution, rather than really understanding road users. In fact, customers were mostly seen as a nuisance. They were serial complainers who harassed engineers and prevented us from getting on with our jobs. And engineering was very problem-centric. It was about solving a technical problem, applying codes and specifications. And in this, I was well supported, mentored, developed. And in my early career, I ping-ponged between a few London boroughs, local authorities, so long ago that they kind of all the experiences blur into one. Like Matthew, my early experiences were with the world of direct labour delivery. And that was very much based on employee trust. You know, you had totally dedicated people like the chap who would be there any time, night and day, anywhere in the borough to lift up a gully grate to pick out someone's car keys if they'd dropped them down. And then you had people that kind of plodded very slowly through. And the difference in rates of productivity was absolutely immense. I did wonder at the time why low productivity was not managed, but there seemed to be a reluctance by line managers to having the very difficult conversations that were needed and having a vision for a new big picture, or even just the existing big picture. So at this time in local government, if you were a good engineer with good attention to detail and solid delivery, with a bit of flair shown from time to time, you might be promoted, but mostly you just carried on doing what you always did, with the big picture changing around you. If you were a mediocre engineer, still with that attention to detail, you'd turn out drawings and designs, help the contractor setting out curb levels, do what you'd always done, with the big picture changing around you. If you were a poor performing engineer, you'd make mistakes, waste time and taxpayers' money, you'd probably get a graduate trainee to do it for you anyway, and do what you'd done for a very long time, with the big picture changing all around you. Few engineers wanted to get involved with changing the big picture itself. And was all this variance in management and productivity the precursor to compulsory competitive tendering? Well, it's quite a blunt instrument, and of course based on the ideology that the private sector must be more efficient. And it certainly did lead to a realisation that there were inefficiencies and behaviours that needed to be tackled. It led to the setting up of an internal competitive environment where I worked in an inner London borough. But what a change in behaviours in people it brought about, and not for the better. In preparation for the in-house bid, staff could elect whether they wanted to work on the client side or on the service delivery side. And it created a kind of imaginary wall built between colleagues. You know, lunchtime visits to the gym or the running track that used to be shared suddenly became exclusive, with the client staff feeling the need to excommunicate themselves from the delivery staff. It was like a kind of master-slave setting up overnight. And in my view, it's taken us 3 subsequent decades to take the journey of returning to collaboration, efficient, effective collaboration with the right incentives. As well as the change in behaviour, which you get on with as you find yourself in a new community, a community that was set itself up against the private sector as a viable competitor. For me, this opened my eyes to so much more than engineering and problem solving. I was part of the in-house team bidding against the private sector, and I started to see the service as a business with all it entails: productivity, capability, cost, return on investment, marking, communication, and change. Beats this engineering lark any time, I thought. And for me, it was the journey towards studying for an MBA, specialising in organisational culture, which I completed in 2003. And it stood me in such good stead for shaping our organisations into the future because it taught me about outcome focus and the customer. So the world of CCT was upon us, and the internal bid won by a hair's breadth, and the lack of integration ensued, the client and supplier being in different buildings, different computer drives, different responses to the same customers, driven by a political ideology. And when there was a change in political leadership, as Matthew said, there was a change in ideology again. And this is what was published in 1989 by the Department of Environment, Transport and the Regions. Compulsion for competition has also bred antagonism, so that neither local authorities nor private sector suppliers have been able to realise the benefits that flow from a healthy partnership. All too often, the process of competition has become an end in itself, distracting attention from the services that are actually provided to local people. CCT will therefore be abolished. And as Matthew said, best value was introduced in its place. It was far less prescriptive. It was about securing economic, efficient and effective services and demonstrating continuous improvements. But gosh, the performance measures, there were 90 KPIs covering several dimensions of performance. I spent quite a long time under the best value regime, and I was quite an advocate of it. Tremendous thought had gone into the importance of outcomes in customers, maybe too much. Who remembers BV 165? Percentage of crossings that were accessible, troops of people wandering around road networks, testing rotating cones and dustbin locations at bus stops. It did have the customer in mind, but maybe it created a cottage industry of its own. Perhaps we had moved on to base performance on the customer, but was it really best value for the customer? How much had the best value regime really engaged with the supply chain or with the customer? How much had we engaged with the very people that delivered the work to get clients to comply with the indicators? How inefficient was it to get contractors to bit-piece the delivery of such pernickety requirements as that of BV 165? Anyway, Eric Pickles, in his wisdom, took all that away. Not long after best value was introduced, I moved from local authority to TfL, and the best value regime applied there too. And at least there we were highway authority and traffic signal authority, which made it easier a bit to collaborate. Anyway, I don't fully recall the demise of the best value regime, but I do recall the terrific focus on the customer as TfL matured as an organisation. Now that initially was with fare-paying customers. That was the need for where Insight started. TfL wanted to move from the kind of lower Thames Water League to the higher John Lewis League, creating a cycle of satisfied paying customers and therefore more investment. But what did that mean for non-paying highway users? At first, they were definitely the poor relatives for research, and gradually it was realised that congestion and utility works were the bane of most Londoners' lives, and there followed programmes of huge detailed research into the many users of roads. And whilst I was at TfL, I led the highway service offer from inherited borough and highways agency contracts through several generations of contracts to a customer-centric collaborative alliance, with the personal view that customer service for highway users transcends political ideology. What customers want is value where they see the value should be focused, and they want to be assured that their often conflicting perceptions are considered. Today, engineers are looking to technology for the solution, data, big data, even bigger data, Six Sigma, all that. That's all very well, but I bring us back to the bigger picture. Data analysis and industrialisation is a means to an end, and the important end is the outcome and experience of our customers. Only with the whole delivery nexus implemented cradle to grave can we achieve this, but we are still stuck currently in supply chains. As I've discovered over the years, though, engineers typically love data and run like hell from intuition. It's the way we are trained and our personal preferences for ways of thinking. We still don't talk to the customer as the customer. As many of you know, I have now gone over to the dark side. I now work in major infrastructure, highways, rail, energy, for Skanska. Skanska exists to build a better society. Skanska who can only survive with certainty of profit. So before, I drove hard on costs for the taxpayer. Now I see the commercial model and its reality. And my experience tells me there can be a better way, which is why I'm excited for the future of highways and infrastructure delivery and management, and indeed, importantly, for leadership in our industry, and even more importantly, the need to all of us seeing the bigger picture. I'm almost there. Construction 2025 set a bold vision for the industry, and the IC adopted Project 13 sets out a bold vision for all parties, the customer, the asset owner, the networks involved in advising, designing and delivering. This new long-term value-driven approach to overcome customer frustrations of infrastructure projects being over budget, over time and non-customer centric. The need for new commercial models that incentivise all parties to contribute to efficiency and the best value outcome. It recognises the need for all our players in our industry to see the bigger picture being about the socio-economic benefits, about greater diversity, and recognising the value all parties bring, including the private sector. So it's got a vision for systems of governance that maximise value to customers and stakeholders rather than minimising the initial capital cost. It's got new methodologies for integrated organisations where the interests are all aligned. It's got new capabilities, processes and systems for effective integration of asset owners. And of course the technology, the digital transformation. What's so heartening about Project 13 is that it does not sit in a vacuum. It's got exactly the same sentiment as the Treasury's Transport Infrastructure Performance Programme, the DfT's Transport Infrastructure Efficiency Programme, the Strategic Vision for Rail, the Highways England Integrator Model, HS2 Construction Partner. It takes us away from the commercial model versus the customer to an outcome-based, customer-focused model where engineers will be compelled to get the bigger picture. So I share no pictures in this presentation, but I did want to share one, if it's there. Yeah. My late father had this brooch made for me to symbolise what he hoped was going to be a golden road to the future. And I think this new big picture approach, which to my mind does transcend political ideology, then the world of highway infrastructure also has a golden future. Thanks.